So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I hope you are all doing well and staying safe. I am Mariam Shref, a senior petroleum engineering student at the Lebanese American University, and I'll be moderating today's session. On behalf of Petro, I want to welcome you all to the first session of Natural Gas Engineering Internship for Spring 2021. Today, we have a distinguished guest speaker with an extensive experience in the oil and gas industry, and he'll be sharing his knowledge about how to engineer your gas condensate reservoirs, reservoir to sales meter. I'm sure his participation will benefit all attendees, so I advise you to take full advantage of his participation and give your full attention to his informative session today. Without any further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Shah Kabir. Dr. Kabir has been a lecturer in petroleum engineering at the University of Houston for the last 4 years. He has over 40 years of experience in the oil and gas industry, having worked for Chevron, Hess, and Schlumberger. His experiences include testing and performance forecasting in conventional and unconventional reservoirs, pressure and rate transient analysis, wellbore fluid and heat flow modeling, and many aspects of reservoir engineering. He published more than 130 journal articles and 2 books, and contributed to the 2009 SPE Transient Well Testing Monograph. He was an SPE Distinguished Lecturer between 2006 and 2007, and received both the Distinguished Membership Award in 2008 and the Honorary Membership Award in 2016. So, Doctor, we are delighted to have you with us today. And on a final note, if you have any question related to the technical content of the presentation, please feel free to drop it down in the Q&A section. We will try to answer as much questions as possible. As a reminder, please join the Google Classroom for this training and do the quizzes for each lecture. If you have any inquiries regarding how to join, please refer to yesterday's kickoff session. It has been uploaded on Petro's YouTube channel. Without any further ado, Dr. Kabir, the mic is yours.
Okay, I'm in Houston, so good morning and welcome to you all, and then good evening to the rest. So thank you for coming in to this event. So this is the part of the content that I had shared in my tour back in 2006 and 2007. And so let me get the ball rolling. And so that's why you're seeing 2006 Time Magazine's headline, and it's a global warming was the key item, and it is getting increasingly more complex, as we all know. So what I was promoting is that, okay, the gas has much lower carbon footprints. And so why not use that to the extent possible? But even that is becoming an issue because of this carbon emissions. So I'll give you in my opening remarks, we'll come to that issue. So this is the good old days when I was with Chevron, and so the content of this presentation are in these SP articles. So in terms of the outline, we have just to get a very quick idea about what's going on around the globe right now. So that's the updated part that I included in this talk. And so what we are targeting is the gas condensate system. That doesn't mean that the content of today's lecture, we cannot handle any dry gas system, but the focus is on recovery factor and gas cycling in the what happens in a gas condensate system. So we started with a simple tool, and the whole idea was that it's not just about the uh, what's happening in the reservoir. We want to handle the wellbore and also the surface flow line network as well. So we did develop a simple simulator to that effect on a spreadsheet. And then we used a very complex model that includes the reservoir numerical model, the flow through the wellbore, and also the surface network. And at the end of the day, we included economics. The idea is that what we are targeting is that how do you design your flow line? To put it simple, what should be the pipe diameter of the flow line, given the uncertainties in different reservoirs that we'll be targeting and the flow rates? We can speculate, but unless you really drill or develop those fields, we just don't know the deliverability and so forth. So given all these uncertainties, what can we do? So that's what the whole thing is all about. And then when you get the ball rolling, start the engine, then how do you go about managing the reservoir? So that's a long, long story, but all we have is 3-4 slides on that. So it will be very compact, and we simply don't have the time to delve into gory details. So bear with me, and we'll get through with this. Okay, so this is the worldwide energy supply and demand, and I tried to be as neutral as I could be. So in the OECD, I think most of you know what that is Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. So this was founded in 1961 and in Paris. So this is the production profile for natural gas. As you can see, US is leading the cause, followed by Canada, and Australia, and so forth. So it doesn't present the whole worldwide view, but just the one segment of it. So we are comparing the OECD and also non-OECD. So this is for pipeline gas, and the blue, the dark blue, is intended for the LNG, liquefied natural gas. So that's the same thing going on here. So this is the global overview. So here from Qatar, so there's a ton of liquefied natural gas is headed toward Europe, especially targeting the UK. Some from the US is going to Europe, and all the way, as you can see, to Japan and Australia. Is a lot of that stuff is going over there. Anyway, so that gives you a quick global overview. What's going on in terms of the liquefied natural gas? How do you trade it? Because you can produce gas, but then how do you transport across the globe? Now, the only way you can do it if you can liquefy it, and then you can send it by way of your ships. So in simple terms, that's what it is. Again, you can Google it and find all the information. That's what I did. So this is an outlook for BP, and there are similar content under Chevron. Chevron and also ExxonMobil. And again, you can Google it and get to this. So as you can see that, so what's happening in next 20 years, so to speak. So as you can see, the oil and gas are quite vibrant, even though, so we may be in a transition to different type of fuel and so forth, but it's not going to happen overnight. That's my take, and what you are seeing from all the major operators and different other sources. So how about honoring the CO2 emission, the Paris Climate Change Accord and all that? So as you can see that if you go through the rapid transition, then that will help. But history, if you take a lesson or two, has taught us that even if you develop a new technology, a good example would be if you have a land phone and then we went to cell phone. Everybody has it. So it didn't happen overnight. It takes a long transition time. So this is just to give you an overview that unless we are able to transition into something literally overnight, there will not be reduction in the carbon emission. The advantage of gas is that it has the lowest footprint. Okay, it's a similar chart that's giving you the primary source of fuel that we use for energy consumption. So if you look at gas, if anything, it will grow with time. But one good news is that, so what the projection is that the renewable resource, okay, so if that's the color code, so how that is growing with time. So it is going to grow. And by the way, I'm working on that extraction of geothermal energy right now. So that doesn't mean that I have a cell phone in my hand, but it will take a long time for that transition to take place. Or if you want to bring in biofuel and other sources. So surely solar and wind, solar is taking hold. So all this renewable form would begin to grow. But that doesn't mean that oil and gas is going to disappear. Okay, so as we all know, that the use of energy is directly related to the economics in any country or any system. So growth in economy has to do with the use of consumption, right? That's what the US economy is related to. So, and then with that consumption, the source of energy comes into it and becomes a big player in that game. So this gives you an overview of that. So what we are exploring, and this is a real project that I was pursuing back in the day when I was at Chevron. So we are pursuing a project where we could convert the produced natural gas into an LNG project for export from country X. Just as a reminder, this slide is not in your slide pack, but this is the critical point. And so you have all seen this pressure temperature diagram. So when we talk about gas condensate, that's what we mean, that it exists close to the critical point, just as volatile oil does, or just the other side of the critical point. And the dry gas is that when you depressurize it within the reservoir, then it will not touch this two-phase envelope. But in reality, we bring it into surface, right? So, and if it travels through this, it does, because you are lowering the temperature when you bring it to surface. And let's say surface temperature is down here, where my cursor is. So we'll travel through this two-phase envelope and produce some liquid, even for dry gas. But for gas condensate system, you will have intrinsically, you are going to bring in a lot of liquid. Okay, so that's the difference between the dry and the gas condensate. So what I'm going to present or talk about pertains to gas condensate system. Okay, so what we did, let's dive right in. So we are exploring the recovery factor for the gas. And then the question that came up in the early stage of the project is, okay, that if a low permeability system and not too much liquid in the gas, 45 stacked ton barrels per million stacked standard cubic feet. And so high would be over 100 or so, 100 barrels per million cubic feet. So I said, okay, so if I'm producing at these rates and I have only 1/3 of the formation is completed, so it's 1/3, you see 1/15, 1/15. I increase the rate. So if you increase the rate, but you have to have 1/3 of the formation completed to enhance the recovery factor. And so what interested us to pursue it? Because many times we think as engineers that, okay, all we have to do is connect with the reservoir horizon, and it doesn't matter how deep or how thick the formation is. So this is just to clarify that what may work or may not work. So you have to have at least 1/3, and you have to produce at that rate to be able to recover a high recovery factor. So what role does skin play? So as you know, skin is a flow impediment. So it can be due to the damage that we created during the drilling and mud circulation, and we didn't clean it up, or it can arise because of what length of the formation has been completed. That provides the skin. The good analogy would be the traffic flow. Let's say you have a 4-lane highway, and if one lane gets shut down, then the traffic jam starts. So if you get the 2 lanes shut down out of 4, that's huge. So you get my point. And if 3 out of 4 get shut down because of the big traffic accident, then it'll take forever to get through that. So that's what happens, literally. If you complete only a little bit, that's why we're trying to make the point. It's 1/15. It's very difficult. You are sacrificing a lot of. So same thing. You can look at it through the prism of skin or completion interval. And as you can see that unless you have sufficiently high flow rate, your recovery factor will suffer. Okay, so that's the point we wanted to make here. So, and we came up with a, for our system, that is, came up with we did the statistical design of experiments to come up with a game plan. It's okay, how does that play out? And you see, it's a recovery factor is function of, you'll get 46% in our within our envelope with the system that we studied. But if you want to get additional one, that okay, permeability matters, and so does the yield, that is the barrels that is embedded in the gas system. So they are all have a negative impact on the skin, yield, perforation interval, and so on. So it gives you a quick idea that what the recovery factor is dependent upon. Okay, another way of looking at it, as you can see, these are high yield. The one that I displayed previously was only 45. So as the yield increases, these are, by the way, based on the fluids we have in different fields in the entire system. So I didn't pick them arbitrarily. So though this was a big challenge for us, okay, so what happens when we have high yield fluid? By the way, you make more and more revenue, generate more and more revenue as the yield begins to climb, because you make most money by way of selling the liquid, not selling the gas and converting it to liquid LNG and then transport it. This liquid is the elephant in the room. So again, as you see, the permeability controls it. So this is the loss in gas recovery for compared to dry gas. Okay. So yield can adversely impact that unless you are managing it well, or if the system permeability is low. So this is, we were exploring, okay, do we need to circulate gas? So I have a producer here, and I bring in a drill and injector. And this, by the way, this is the real reservoir that we are studying. So we inject it so that we keep the pressure up, because as we are producing in any reservoir, the pressure begins to decline, right? And then the liquid begins to come out, especially in this kind of system. And conversely, in an oil reservoir, gas comes out of the solution. Here, the liquid drops out. So we want to minimize that dropout situation by circulating dry gas through this. And then it can also help remove the liquids that are dropping out. So we studied that problem. This is the top view of the same system. Put some finer grids here. So we came up with this sort of correlation. Okay, so how can we increase our recovery, condensate recovery factor, or in this case, liquid? As you can see, it's a so you will get about 46% of that, and then the yield becomes an issue, permeability. So here, as you can see, the voidage replacement ratio is a big deal. That how much, because these are very low numbers, so they don't count. So that these are the two things. It's the voidage replacement ratio. To what extent are you replacing 30% of the voidage, or 50% or 100%? That matters. And the producer to injector distance. PID, producer to injector distance. So that also matters. So if you put it too far away, then as our study, when we studied it, that will begin to have the activity becomes lower and lower, and it will have lower influence. So this is the predicted versus observed. So that means the correlation that we have generated has legitimacy, that it is working out. Okay, so here is the incremental condensate recovery factor in cycling. That if we are replacing 100% voidage via our voidage replacement ratio, so we can have huge incremental condensate recovery. And as I said earlier, the condensate is of big interest, even though this is a LNG project, we liquefy the natural gas, but this is real bonus when we are generating a lot of liquids out of this gas system, which is inherent in the gas. Okay, so how the projected to producer to injector distance, or PID, matters. So it's 2.5 kilometer. Okay, that's good. So it shouldn't be too close, and we stopped here, given the size of the system and all that logistics. So it gives you an idea that before you start drilling and studying everything, this sort of study gives you insights how you can make money before you start drilling. That's what the management is interested in learning before they make their capital investment. So that's the main motivation for pursuing it. Okay, they are pertain to different wells. So what did we learn from this segment? Yeah, so when the fluid, you get into the two-phase envelope that I was saying, as you depressurize the system in the reservoir at a constant temperature, so you reach the two-phase envelope. Okay, so when the liquid begins to come out of gas, it impairs the flow of gas in the system. So it reduces the recovery factor. So it becomes severe in low permeability system and high yield system. So this is the low end of the problem, and this is the high end of the problem. And then when you have completion issue, that is, okay, what segment you are perforating and all that, all those things come into play. So if you are doing the gas cycling, dry gas that is, so when you are replacing the voidage at least over 75%, and the producer to injector distance, you are retaining at least 2.5 kilometers. So, okay. So we develop correlations that relates to our system. So don't think that they are applicable universally. So it just pertains to our system. Okay. So this was so what I just shared with you, that's the backstory. So what we really want to do is this. So all this yellow stuff that you see, these are separate reservoirs. Okay, so I have 4 here and 5 there. And these are different fields, I should say. And within that particular field, you have multiple reservoir layers. So in each of these yellow box, we have multiple reservoirs, vertically speaking. And so when we show this, that means the entire number of reservoirs are active and however many wells that are in play. So these are not single well system, rather single reservoir system. Okay, so this is how it is. So what we are pursuing is what should be the flow line diameter for this 15-kilometer line, and then this is a 5-kilometer line. That's for the O and F flow line. So it goes to the separator, you get everything out, the liquid that you get out of it, you can sell it right away along with your oil because that's liquid, which is the condensate. And then from the separator, you take the dry gas and liquefy it in the LNG plant, liquefied natural gas, and then you export it. So we were trying to study the whole system. So what we are interested in, okay, how many wells do we need in each of the compartments? And what should be the flow line diameter in an objective way? So now we have to bring in numerical modeling and not just the reservoir modeling. We have to have the wellbore, then flow line, the whole thing. Okay, so from the reservoir that studies that we talked about earlier, okay, how do you do the wellbore modeling? Because that's another arena that I've been pursuing all my career, fluid flow and heat transfer in wellbores. So I said, okay, well, we studied it and they said, okay, here's some data from Govia and Fogarasi, which is at the University of Calgary in the 70s. And then the Texas Railroad Commission data, which was, again, came from another article in the 80s. And this is some of the data that we gathered for this particular project-related stuff. So so you're seeing that the so-called homogeneous model seems to be working extremely well, if you especially look at the correlation. So what is a homogeneous model? In a multi-phase flow environment, what we are saying that the gas is carrying the liquid all the way. So there is no slippage going on in the system. So I can use regular single phase flow modeling so long I recognize what fraction is liquid. Okay, so that's the underlying thought process. So when we are getting into the modeling and then we compared, I said, okay, this is the finite difference modeling, the red one, the circles. And then, so it obviously includes the multiple cells. And if we do the simple single cell model, well, not too bad. Sure, it doesn't go all the way, but and the same thing for water. So this is the condensate. This is gas, sorry. And this is water. And that's the condensate. That's the big item of interest. So the point is that yeah, we should use a numerical model, but if we use a simple material balance single cell model, that's not too bad. So we studied the information from this particular reservoir system. So we were just showing one yellow dot that we showed you in the previous slide. So this is one reservoir. As you can see from the DST, we learned that it's very high perm, and however, we have a huge skin in the system. And the non-Darcy flow is also huge. And this is another horizon that we investigated, and we found, okay, the permeability is double, thickness is double, huge skin. So that needs to be the near wellbore system needs to be cleaned up. And then there is a huge non-Darcy skin as well. So yeah, the higher the flow rate is better, but then we have to live with this reality that we have huge non-Darcy skin in the system. So all those things need to be understood, and when you are designing a a game plan or roadmap. And the original gas in place is very comparable, as you can see, even though the thickness is different. Okay, so we tried the completion series, different completion scenarios. Okay, do you complete depending on your KH ratio, and what kind of cumulative gas would you get? So it looks like the gas or the condensate is not impacted by the KH ratio for these two reservoirs, M6 and M7. However, when the KH ratio is that different, 1:22, then it matters. So in other words, when you are commingling the different reservoirs together in the same wellbore, what would be the total outcome of the system? So you cannot just say, "Oh, I just perforated this interval or introduce this reservoir X into the system, and I'm doing okay." So it's not that trivial. So then that raised the question: okay, how do we design our completion intervals? Let's say we have 3 horizons based on this particular field data. I showed 2 of the 3 in the previous slide. So how do we do that? So we have the conventional strategy is, okay, just put perforations everywhere and you don't care. Okay. So what we need to do, as we saw that you saw the KH ratio is 2:1. So as you go down in any reservoir system, the reservoir rock quality begins to degrade, right? That's the law of nature. So when you have that lower permeability, you have to complete it just about the whole thing, because that's the best KH you can get out of the system. So permeability doesn't suffice. You also need the H to have the conductivity in the system. So cut the long story short, what we did is that the specific perforation is based on the KH ratio. So as we go higher up, my thickness decreases and permeability increases because of how the system is laid in geologic time. So we decrease and when you do the completion. The other one is the so-called intelligent completion, that you can control mechanically how much fluid that you can want to produce from each horizon. So the lesson learned is that whether you go this way or that way, you have to able to commingle production in a given wellbore, you have to manage production rate coming from each reservoir. If you just leave it alone like this, then things may not go well for you. Okay, so here is our. So we did the discounted income calculation. As you can see, it doesn't matter between these two guys, whereas this one needs installing a system and managing. But if you do it a priori, it's all right. The conventional, yeah, the number is not that different, but the liquid income suffers a little bit. The big ticket item is that if you go over here and just randomly complete, your total depletion time will increase. Okay, so that's not good for your project management perspective. So moving on. So this was our recommendation. You can just do it up front. If you have the drill stem test data, so you know the KH from each reservoir, then you can do it. So we developed a simple simulator first, and then just a spreadsheet. So we handle all the uh, fluid properties. We have the material balance model, and also the homogeneous flow model in the wellbore. So that's what we have. So we plug in all the system parameters, and we do the computation. We are handling material balance in the reservoir as well as in the wellbore. And at the end, we are doing economic evaluation. And the outputs of that, you see rate forecast and cum production. By the way, this was done it was a summer project, and this individual was working with me. She was from University of Texas and Austin, and she is totally gifted and came up with that, and that became her master's thesis. There's more to it, but I'm just giving you a 2 seconds overview. So these are the three reservoirs, and these are all the input parameters that we plugged in. I'm not going to go through that. Everything is in the spreadsheet. In the slide pack. So we consider non-Darcy flow, everything you can think of. And that's the shift factor. We kept it the same, and as you can see, different acreage. Okay, so and then we have the wellbore model and everything. So we considered reservoir wellbore. So this is what we came up with. If we do the deterministic, because what we are trying to find out that how many wells do we need in this particular different reservoir system. So this is a single reservoir. This brown that is showing that that's your cumulative gas production. And this stuff is when you add the second well. So as you can see, in this particular reservoir, given the properties, second well looks very reasonable. And the M6, we have some increments. But do we need another well for this guy, M7? That's a questionable. Okay, so this is a deterministic approach. Then we said, okay, we get into the probabilistic approach, because that way you can get the whole picture in an unbiased fashion. So before we do that, so this is the simple NPV calculations for all reservoirs. So this is for single well system. When you add the second well, you have so this is without the well, second well, the NPV, and both of them. And so it is showing us the value proposition. So let's explore that in the context of in a probabilistic frame. Okay, so this is the seismic survey we had from one of the wells here. And then, but there is a lot of uncertainty on the surface. In other words, what we are trying to say that, okay, this well is well established in terms of the thickness of the bed, but we do not know what it's like when we go away from the well. So we had to introduce uncertainty realization. based on consultation with the geophysical expert. And given the limited data, we had data from only one well, and we have a bunch of other wells, but we didn't have that, but we had some generated maps. So this is how we are handling the geometry of the system. So the gas in place in one of those sands, okay, it's a 50% probability that we know we have over 300 BCF of gas. So when we look at the NPV in a probabilistic frame, as you can see, the R1 is unquestionably great. So this is the 50% probability that we can say that it will generate this kind of revenue, over 20 million. This reservoir, okay, again, 50% probability it will be on the positive side. So M7 has a question mark, that it is barely over 0. And so that's how you evaluate it. So we shouldn't probably drill a second well here because we cannot justify the cost for that well. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. So this is going back to that. We are trying to estimate the flow line ID. So what we did is said, okay, we have the volumetric uncertainty, what kind of what volume we have based on the seismic maps that I showed you, and also the fluid yield. That is, we didn't have multi-field wide PVT property. We had something here and something over there. And if we didn't have something, we used analogy to say fill the gap. So we had the uncertainty there too. And this is what we're looking for, the pipeline ID for the F&O flow line. And the economics, okay, capital expenditure and operating expenditure. So what we are trying to, the metrics that we're using, the NPV and DPI. So I think all of you know what NPV is, right? Net present value, and DPI. I'll explain that in a moment. This is discounted profitability index. So what is profitability index? It's the profitability of the future cash flows and then on initial investment. So to break even, you have to have at least 1, right? So your profitability index, if it goes higher than 1, then that means the project is economic. So how did it turn out? So as it turns out, that given all the uncertainty that we talked about, and the details are in the articles, but we can say that we can get over 4,000 days, and so we can get this kind of TCF without any uncertainty. So for your LNG plant, I have plenty of time to figure things out, right? Over 4,000 days. So over 10 years. So we're in good shape. So beyond that, it can go as low as this, go flat, or it can go as high as that. Why is that? Because we are missing data. So as I said, the fluids we had to interpolate. We didn't drill wells, so we had to use seismic data, regional seismic data, and so forth. So that provides the uncertainty as far as the gas deliverability is concerned. What about liquid? That's where your main cash flow comes from. I'm talking about condensate. Look at that. It's almost literally from day one, we have uncertainty band. This is the low projection, and that's the high projection. And your solution would be probably in between. We don't know where. So what does that mean? That, hey, we need to collect, it's telling us that, hey, we need to collect more liquid samples, go into these wells, and because many operators, what they were doing, the gas was overlaying the oil reservoirs down deep. So they can access, physically speaking, some of those reservoirs and find out and take samples. That way we can minimize this uncertainty band. So you are okay on the LNG front, but in terms of what the management is interested is, how can we make money by selling this condensate? So it's okay for a few years, but we will, then you can say, hey, this uncertainty band is not that much, and we will figure it out as we keep drilling. Okay, the management may accept that proposition. Okay, so when we are doing all the uncertainty analysis, and then that too in terms of the discounted profitability index, our objective here is to find what should be the pipe ID in the two flow lines. Okay, so, and these are the uncertainty spreads. Okay, and this is the vertical line, that's the 0. So that's the P50. So what you want is to find something, a trend that has the least deviation from this. In other words, the larger the spread, the more uncertain the system is. So who won the race? So this is telling us that it's 16 and both flow line diameter could be 16 each. Okay. Whereas this one is saying the first flow line, the longer, could be 18 inch, but the other one is 20 inch. Why? Because it has the least deviation. Okay. So we made 500 runs to generate this with this for a multivariate problem. And it was very time consuming. We need multiple machines, and many days we were running them over the weekends. So the whole idea is, and then we use the Latin hypercube sampling algorithm. So we can do it with 500 samples. So what Latin hypercube sampling algorithm does is something like this. So let's say you have a cube, and then you just you sample it. So it does the sampling in an even fashion. Whereas if you go to the Monte Carlo, it becomes random. It's not disciplined. So it may just gather sample in a cube from in a very undisciplined way. So as you can see, this one looks good, but the other guys are all over the map. So, and that too, we had to use double the number of sampling, 500 to 1,000. So we recommend that whenever you are doing multivariate regression analysis, you do so with a Latin hypercube. Okay, these are the last segment of my talk. So when you drill and everything and you begin production, and so initially we have to make big assumptions that, okay, this reservoir is contiguous. But in the real life, my experience has been those assumptions are not correct. The reservoirs are often compartmentalized. So that means it will increase your well count. Well, that changes your economic picture when we go along. So how can you tell the difference that the wells are in same compartment or in different compartments when the production or the field development starts? Okay, just a quick one. You don't have to do any calculations or anything. All you need is your production data, gas flow rate, and the flowing bottom pressure. It could be also wellhead pressure for gas. So that's where it starts initially. This will be the slope. Time is increasing this way. And this plateau period, that means we are producing at a constant wellhead pressure. And when the boundary dominant flow begins at this time, this point, it turns the corner. Okay, in simple English, it's telling us that if your wells are in the same compartment, then in the boundary dominant flow, they should all overlay. Then it's telling you, okay, these wells are in the same compartment. I don't need to drill more wells. Okay. So here's a couple of real life field examples from Deepwater Gulf of Mexico. So here's a geologic map of the seismic study is telling us that maybe these two are in one compartment, this one is in different compartment. And these are the real quotes from the geoscientist, not mine. It says the fault probably seals, this blue stuff. This fault probably doesn't extend beyond this. Possible flow barrier here. And the question was, why were we pursuing it? The flow rate was declining rapidly, and the management was interested. We want to drill a well. The Deepwater Gulf of Mexico is very expensive. You need hundreds of millions of dollars to drill a well. So where would they put the well in? Would it be here, here, here? Shell field channel is probably here. So they see the words probable, possible, again, probable. They appear to be sure about this part. Okay. So what we're trying to answer is that with these two wells, 1 and 4, are they in the same compartment? And where is well 3? So well 3 on the right side, 1, 4, and 4 on the left side. Okay, so these are the two left side wells, 4 and 1, as you can see, they're overlaying pretty well. Well 3 has another trajectory. So if you do the fitting, you see the exponential fit. But well 3 is this, and because of the shear signature, it's saying that it's depleting too fast. Meaning, if you want to drill a well, then it should not be in this compartment. It's smaller than this, where these two wells reside. Here's another example from dry gas reservoirs from the Far East, I think. So as you can see, we can do the P over Z plot to do this. And so they appear to be in separate compartments. Okay, for the interest of time, I'll get to that. So when you do the PQ plot, we generate this so this is the slope of the line. So we can say with confidence that these two are in a separate compartment and these two are. So this one has more in-place volume because it's a slow depletion rate as opposed to this one. Okay, so let me summarize. So we found that the second well was unattractive for these two reservoirs, M6 and M7. When you do the combined reservoir wellbore surface network modeling, and when you combine with economics, then you can learn the whole story. So we can handle uncertainty in many variables. And the decision variable, if it is the net NPV or any other profitability index, whatever you want to use, that can be brought to bear. And our overwhelming learning was that Latin hypercube sampling is better than the Monte Carlo. And the reservoir compartmentalization question, whether you're in the development phase, you can learn just by doing the PQ plot. It doesn't require any computation. So that's all I had, and I'm open to question. So I ran a minute over, so we have about half an hour. So Miriam.
Informative session. Now we'll begin by addressing some questions. The first question is that what is the difference between wet gas and dry gas?
So let's go back to this figure. So this is called dry gas. And wet gas is that it's basically gas condensate. And so keep in mind that dry gas is even because I've worked with real dry gas, but even when you bring it to surface, you go through this envelope. So it will have maybe 2-3 barrels per million cubic feet. So materially it doesn't matter, but nonetheless, even for dry gas, you will have some liquid production. Okay.
What does the yield factor mean?
Sorry?
What does the yield factor signifies?
I don't think I understood the question very well.
Just asked about what does the yield factor means.
Okay, can you speak up a little bit?
He asked that the yield factor has been mentioned in some of the equations. So he's asking what does this factor signifies?
Oh, recovery factor. It's okay. It's simply what fraction of the in-place volume can be produced to surface for economic evaluation. Because whatever you are producing, you can sell it, right? To power grid and for other purposes. For home heating, to everything. So that content is that's what recovery factor means, that given X volume, what fraction can be produced. So again, very generically speaking, you can get about 70% of the fluid, the gas that in a reservoir to surface. Just a ballpark number, and please don't quote me, just to give an idea. Whereas from an oil reservoir, good oil reservoir, you can get maybe 30-35%, just to give you some perspective. So the gas recovery factor is much higher than the oil recovery factor. Again, these are ballpark numbers. So
Yes, thank you. Now we have also another question. Is it easier to produce wet gas or dry gas?
it's not a problem production-wise, but if you are going through this two-phase envelope, then it's the degree of the liquid content and how much of that liquid is dropping out could be a problem. That will interfere with the recovery factor. So the drier the gas, the higher will be the recovery factor. So for the sake of conversation, if this is really heated, or this is, so you really don't touch it. Let's say my gas is here. I'm just trying to give a hypothetical example. And I produce it all the way to surface and this one, meaning I don't intersect with this two-phase envelope. Yeah, then it'll be real dry gas, and you get over 80% or 85% recovery factor, whatever. But generally speaking, that even dry gas, as I said, would have some liquids in it. Because if you intersect with this and in the whole system, from reservoir to wellbore to surface network, and so it'll have some liquid in it.
Is that what factors should be taken into consideration when deciding if it is better to convert the gas to liquefied natural gas for transportation or transport the gas as compressed natural gas?
Good question. It's matter of everything boils down to economics. So LNG plant is non-trivial. You can do it. Technology is there. But if you want to export it, you have to have volume, sufficient volume, and you have to have the destination and the cost of transportation. Is it going across the globe, or is it just tens of miles, so to speak? So everything then revolves around the economic value proposition umbrella. So meaning it starts with the reservoir, how large the field is, and is it for 10 years or 20 years? How long it's going to last? And do you have a client where you can sell this gas to? So just because you have a lot of gas and you can convert it into LNG, okay, but who is the customer? So all those things come into play.
Now we have come to end, and as a reminder, please don't forget to join the Google Classroom for the training, and please fill the personal information document with the same email you're gonna use for the quizzes. After each lecture, a quiz will be posted on the Google Classroom, and there is a final exam. The date will be posted on the Arab Oil and Gas Academy Facebook group. And to highlight, this session has been recorded and it will be uploaded soon on Pyopetra's YouTube channel. So kindly subscribe if you want to get our latest updates. Thank you again, Dr. Kabir, for this informative session. I hope you all enjoyed this session today, and I want to wish you all best of luck for this internship. Have a nice day and see you in future webinars. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.